Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and Apple's Let Loose event just concluded. It was about 35 minutes, as many people got that right. In fact, many people got a lot right as far as what Apple announced. So I thought we'd recap that, go over a few extra details that Apple didn't mention in the keynote, and just give you an overview of what Apple actually did. They started off with the Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro, they basically mentioned that it was for sale, that businesses were using it for different things, but they didn't mention when it was going on sale elsewhere yet. Many people thought maybe they would announce it in China or the EU, but so far they didn't say anything about it, but basically just showcased it a little bit and then quickly moved on to the next thing with the iPad. Now, the iPad 10th gen, while this was at the end of the event, was dropped to $349. So it starts at $349 now, and they've gotten rid of the 9th gen iPad. So that's something that was discontinued, and now we just have USB-C based iPads. They started off with the iPad Air, and the iPad Air comes in two different sizes as we expected, and what we have is the 11-inch and a 13-inch like we currently have with the iPad Pro. So an 11-inch and 13-inch, they start at 128 gigabytes of storage. They come in at 128, 256, 512, or 1 terabyte storage options with 4 different colors: blue, purple, starlight, and space gray. It does come with the M2 chipset, which they say is 50% faster than the M1, and it's basically everything else is the same. So we have the same sort of liquid retina display on the display itself. We also have a landscape camera now, as we expected, and we have stereo speakers with increased bass on the 13-inch model. So it starts at $599 and then goes up to the 1 terabyte storage option, which can be quite expensive. Now, one of the good things is if you have a Magic Keyboard, the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, currently the 12.9-inch or the 11-inch version, fit the new iPad Air models. So if you already have one of these and you wanted to get the Air, this accessory will work with it, as they've introduced a new Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So the overall announcement for the iPad Air wasn't terribly exciting. It doesn't even have the upgraded display that we have on the iPad Pro currently. It's just the Liquid Retina and basically a revamped version of this with upgraded specs with an M2. Not a whole lot of changes there. One thing they did change, which was a little bit of a last-minute surprise the other day, was the Apple Pencil. It's now called the Apple Pencil Pro, the new one they've introduced. So we have the USB-C, Apple Pencil 2, and Apple Pencil Pro. And these are available now. The difference with the Pro is it has a new squeeze gesture. That's something we mentioned before. You'll be able to squeeze it and then rotate it also. And it has a sensor for that, and also has haptic feedback in the top. You'll be able to feel when you're actually touching different things, rotating it, and you can also locate it now in Find My. The great thing with the Apple Pencil Pro is it's still $129. So instead of being maybe $199 as many expected, it's the same price as we've had currently for quite a while. The big announcement was with the iPad Pro models though, and much of what was stated before is what we actually got. We have an 11-inch and 13-inch model, but they're much thinner at 5.3 and 5.1 millimeters. That's actually thinner than an iPad Nano according to Apple, and it's the thinnest Apple product ever. Compared to this 12.9-inch iPad Pro, it's also lighter at 1.28 pounds or 582 grams compared to 1.51 pounds. You have the same finishes in silver or space black, but you start at 256 gigabytes of storage now. It goes 256, 512, both of those models have 8 gigs of RAM, and then you have a 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte option with 12 gigs of RAM. Now the display is a huge change here also, where we have a new OLED display. It's actually called a tandem OLED, as Apple combined 2 OLED displays to give it a higher brightness, since OLEDs typically struggle with that with HDR. So it's 2752 by 2064 on the 13-inch model at 264 pixels per inch. Can do 1000 nits regularly and up to 1600 nits HDR, very similar to what we currently have. However, on the 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte models, we now have a nano texture glass option, similar to a Pro Display XDR, or maybe a Studio display. So that's something I can't wait to try out, see if it's really great, or if it's something that maybe makes the display a little bit worse for some. But if you're in an environment like this, where you have a bunch of different reflections, that would be great for different video. Now, one of the big surprises here is we got the M4 CPU. Apple instead skipped the M3 and went right to the M4, where it's supposedly 4 times faster than the M2 at rendering video, and it's more speed for half the power too, so it's more power efficient. Another odd thing we get is just one camera. They've gotten rid of the ultra-wide camera. We still have a 12 megapixel wide, but no ultra-wide, and we still have LiDAR. They've also made an algorithm that removes shadows when taking document scans and makes that much cleaner. It works in camera, apps, notes, and third-party apps. Also, they've moved the front-facing camera to the landscape on all models, so that's something going across everything until they update the iPad mini, which they did not update today. We still have 4-speaker audio, studio mics, and the same battery life of about 10 hours. Hopefully it's a little more efficient than that, but we don't really know. And because it has a landscape camera, they've also built in a new charging mechanism and pairing mechanism for the Apple Pencil to sort of fit in the same spot, but it's paired directly to it. As expected, Apple updated the Magic Keyboard to an aluminum keyboard, or aluminium. This keyboard here lacks function keys. They've added that in the new Magic Keyboard. That's great to see. We also have larger palm rests that are aluminum and a larger trackpad. The overall design looks very similar to what you would expect on a Mac, with different keys for adjusting brightness and volume. So that's great to see on an iPad. It has the same sort of floating hinge with the extra port on the side, and that's something I've really been looking forward to. It also comes in the same colors to match the iPad, so we have silver and space black. So those should look great. Of course, once I get my hands on them, I'll share that as well. The price of the Magic Keyboard is the same, $299 or $349. And the price of the iPad is very similar as well. So let's take a quick look at the different prices. And then there was another surprise that they introduced somewhat in the middle of the video. So if we go to Apple's website, here's the iPad Pro. We'll go here, and if we order now, you'll see it starts at $999 for the 11-inch model and $1299 for the 13-inch model. Now, if you price all of this together, the 13-inch model with the Magic Keyboard, with the Apple Pencil Pro, and no Apple Care with the 2 terabyte model, you can get up to $3,000 after tax, at least in the United States. So it's very expensive. So starts at $1,299 for the larger model, but goes way up in price if you get the larger storage. So you do have those options with nano texture glass, which adds, again, more price to this. So if we pick maybe the 13-inch model, space black, then maybe 2 terabyte, and then you'll see standard glass is $22.99. You add an additional $100 for the nano texture glass, which isn't too bad, given that it's much more expensive on maybe their displays. So nano texture glass, Wi-Fi and cellular, and no engraving. And then if we add an Apple Pencil Pro, no engraving, hit save. It's very complicated now how you select Magic Keyboard in the color that you want, save. Then we scroll down, no trade-in. And then if we buy it, it's $3,077 before tax in the United States. So very expensive for an iPad, and it could be a Mac replacement. Now, something else they introduced today, which was really unexpected, is Final Cut Pro 2 and Logic Pro 2. So those were a bit of an unexpected release. We'll see those a little bit later, but it has 2 times faster rendering for Final Cut, so we'll be able to get that in the App Store. And if we go to Final Cut, give it a second. Final Cut for iPad will get a lot of different updates with live multicam to see up to 4 iPhone cameras at once, so you can sort of have a switcher built in and edit right away. You can also edit off an external drive now with Final Cut Pro 2 for iPad, and you have 4 streams of ProRes RAW support. So lots of big upgrades there, probably some other things as well once it releases. Logic Pro gets session players for bass and keyboard players, the Chroma Glow effect, and a couple more updates also. So those are all of the huge updates today. Quite a few things that I didn't really expect with Final Cut and Logic Pro, and a nice thing with the Magic Keyboard. I expected them to add much more price. Even though it's very expensive, I thought it would be much more expensive than that. So that's just a quick rundown of everything they announced today. It was a fairly short event, and hopefully that gives you an idea of what to expect. I plan to get my hands on probably the Pro model, as this is my most used device, and let me know if you ordered one. Now, both of these wallpapers are actually the wallpapers they show on their website for the new devices. So I'll link those in the description. This is the iPad Air wallpaper and the iPad Pro wallpaper. So I actually like the Air wallpaper quite a bit. So hopefully we'll have that in iOS 17.5 RC and 17.5 once that releases, and then we'll get our hands on that and see what that's all about, probably later today. So let me know what you think of the event in the comments below, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.